8:31 on Tuesday, May 3rd. We will start by doing roll call here. So start with the new guy. We'll go Craig.
We roll call in, so
Yep.
with an I vote or something, Cohen I.
Yep, that works.
Okay. Haven't roll call voted in a meeting before. Go on.
We go Margaret.
Margaret, present.
Irv.
Irv, present.
Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bess, present.
Jennifer.
Jennifer, present.
And me, Ben, present. So yeah, before we get rolling here, we have some new faces to introduce. So we'll start with our student rep. So Tessa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name's Tessa Kaywall. I'm in 11th grade this year, and I am one of 2 student reps. Jaden Case is the other one, and she cannot be here tonight as she's coaching soccer. So I think hopefully we'll both either be here at the meetings or one of us will be, but hopefully both. So just for today, it's just me, but I'm very excited to attend these meetings now.
Perfect. And we're happy to have you. Welcome. Craig, our representative from Leverett, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Craig Cohen, representative from Leverett. Been on the Leverett School Committee for about 6 years. I've not played any role in the region yet. I chaired our committee for the last 2 years and no longer doing that. So now I was voted onto this committee last night. Didn't know there was a meeting so soon, but I was able to. My kids are a little bit older. I've got a 10th grader at the high school and I've got a 6th grader at LES. And it's nice to meet all of you. I've been to the 4-town meeting, so see a little bit of what goes on. And Leverett, I know Mike let you all know, Leverett passed its budget on Saturday with not a single hold. So that was smooth sailing. So thanks for the work you did on that.
Thank you, and welcome to you as well. Now, there's a hand raised. Irv, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I am limited tonight because of a limitation relationship to a concussion protocol. So I can only be on for like 30 minutes in front of a screen. I must say that after 4 years of high school football and 4 years of college football and starting every game for 3 years as a varsity player, never a concussion. But 2 weeks ago, I got a concussion by what I can admit to be mistake, I think, big mistake number 5 in my life. I think it's 5. You know, I keep counting, though. There's all kinds of mistakes you make. The big ones you have to keep track of. I think I'm up to 5.
Mm-hmm. We'll keep from 6.
Hopefully.
So, yeah, hopefully, right? Knock on wood. So now the Regional School Committee will consider entering executive session in accordance with the Open Meeting Law, MGL, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to conduct collective bargaining sessions and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation of APEA if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body and the chair so declares, and I do declare, and to approve minutes in accordance with Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22, with the intention of returning to open session. So we have to go not live for now. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Is there another link for the executive session?
Nope, it'll be here.
Okay, so we don't have to go anywhere.
Nope. We just have to.
Yeah, Maylene, who's a recorder, and I manage kind of the entry exit for those kind of things. So it makes it a little easier for the committee members. Sorry to jump in, Ben.
Oh, no problem. Do we have to take the live part off there in the corner?
And I'm sorry, I was messaging with Tessa about when she get back in the meeting. Has everyone voted to go into executive session yet?
Should probably do that part first.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So I now move that we move into executive session. We'll take a roll call vote.
Second.
Second from Sarah Bess. Thank you. All right, roll call vote now. So we'll go Jennifer,
Jennifer, yes.
Irv. I think I saw him say yes. I didn't hear him say yes.
Yes.
All right, there we go. Sarah Bess. Yes.
Sarah Beth, aye.
Margaret
Margaret, I.
and Craig.
Craig, aye.
And me, Ben, also I. Now we can And has somebody contacted Margaret yet? Or I don't have her.
I shot her an email. I don't have her other contact information, but I shot her an email, and I also shared it with Tessa and Amherst Media, and I just started the stream. So we'll wait a minute for Amherst. Oh, looks like they picked up the stream. I just want them to confirm. Yep, I think we're good.
Alrighty. So now we'll move on to the approval of minutes from April 5th and April 12th. We'll start with the 5th. If I have April 5th. Did anybody have any corrections or adjustments or find any typos? All right, so I move that we approve the minutes from the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee meeting on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. Is there a second? Moved by me, seconded by Jennifer. Take a quick roll call vote. Peter?
Peter, I.
Margaret?
Margaret, I.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Craig?
Craig abstains.
Irv?
Irvi.
And Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bass, aye.
And now we'll move on to the minutes for Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. Did anybody have any corrections, additions, etc.? Peter?
I was not here for that meeting, but I just want to say, following the minutes that Maylene made it so amazingly helpful, especially with those video links. Like I can't say enough about how great they are. So thank you very much for your work.
Nice. Second that shout out to Maylene. Oh, yeah. You try and you do well. So I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the April 12th minutes. 12th, yeah.
Second.
Moved by Jennifer, seconded by Irv. All right. Craig?
Craig abstains.
Peter?
Peter also abstains.
And Sarah Bess?
Sarah Bass, aye.
Irv?
Irvi.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Margaret?
Margaret, I.
And me, Ben, I. The motion passes with 2 abstentions and 5 ayes. Now we will move on to public comment. I don't have any voicemails or emails for public comment. Do folks have like the link to get in here? I don't see any community members or anything for public comment. All right. So I'll move on. And just as a reminder for folks in the public, you can leave a voicemail at 413-362-1891 to leave a voicemail public comment. And then you can also email the full committee at scpubliccomment@arps.org. All right, and now we'll move on to the superintendent's update.
Thank you, Ben. So I want to start by, again, welcoming Tessa and Jaden, who couldn't be here tonight, to the committee. I was able to meet with them and the student advisory rep, librarian at the high school, as well as the prior student rep. And so we had a good conversation about being a student rep on a school committee, and I'd really just encourage Tessa and Jaden to share their piece and share their perspective on the committee. And Tessa, thank you for being here tonight. So I really appreciate it. And thank you to Ruby, who did a great job throughout the year and is off to exciting things in her future moving forward. As Craig was there at the Leverett meeting on Saturday, so Saturday morning, beautiful day, and we made it through unscathed from Leverett meeting with budget passed, and the assessment method passed. I think it was the first time, I don't recall a time where there were no questions asked on either of those. And another thank you to our outgoing Gene Stammel, our outgoing Leverett representative. And we acknowledged him during that time as well. So thank you for the town of Leverett for supporting the regional budget, capital and operational. Last night at the Amherst Town Council, the regional budget was also passed. There were no questions or comments on the operational budget. We spent quite a bit on the capital budget, but in the end, both passed overwhelmingly, unanimously on the operational and overwhelmingly, in my opinion, on the capital. So the next town meeting is Pelham, which is on the 14th of May, and then Shutesbury on the 21st of May. And then we will hopefully have a budget for the next year. So very exciting work and times to be in. Also on Sunday, I should say, just get my weekend days mixed up, there was a multilingual festival on the town common in Amherst. And while many of the participants it was geared towards elementary age students, we had students from middle school, high school reciting poems and songs in languages that were not English throughout the festival. And it was supported by many high school student volunteers. And it was well attended. It was a wonderful event. I'm bad at counting people, but it definitely looked like there was well over 100 people on the town common. Beautiful day. So thank you to all the middle school, high school students who either shared their work, their words, or contributed to that event. And Katie Richardson as well, who organized it, and our MPAC, our Multilingual Parent Advisory Council, they were the spearheading that event on Sunday. So it was great to be there. This afternoon, Jennifer, thank you, and Allison, who's not here tonight, met with our Northampton colleagues and to kind of get going with designing an instrument or feedback tool that we could share with parents, students, and the community and staff about the change in start time. So I thought we made great progress today. Thank you, Jennifer, for your feedback, and I talked to John afterwards, really appreciated that. And, we will try to make maybe one more meeting where we fine tune it and get it out before the school year ends, but really appreciate the participation of school committee members on that. Congratulations to our students who were involved in the musical. I think as I shared last time, the last showing or performance of Hair had to be canceled, but they rebooted and completed it on Friday night last week. Very, very excited fan base, a number of people, because it was the Saturday night show that was canceled. There was a lot of people really looking forward to a weekend show. And the students, as you might expect, were outstanding and received quite an ovation, rightfully so, from the audience, who were thrilled to be able to see it because of what happened. They weren't able to see it a couple weeks prior before the break. We had our middle school had a middle school social dance. It was organized by their student government and with the support of the liaisons, the two teachers who were connected to the student government, as well as the principal, Diego Sharon. One thing that we tried out and will continue when we do for prom is we've collected enough rapid tests where for students who are not part of our rapid test program, we provided rapid tests for everyone who was slated to attend to take the day before. Again, not necessarily perfect, but we feel like it's an additional safety mechanism to support. We want our students involved in social events. They've been desperate for them. They've missed them over the last few years, and it's additional safety measure. So, with our excess, we've been supporting Craig Store, which is for folks without permanent shelter. But we because most of our students collect every other week, the rapid tests, and they tend to go out on Thursday or Friday. It wasn't a huge number of students we had to find more rapid tests for, but we feel like it's a really helpful safety measure, and it works with the high school. We're looking at that for the senior prom as well, and trying to think about indoor gatherings and how to provide them as safely as possible, and certainly testing is a component. So we were really happy to kind of have a dry run at that with our middle school social. My last one is just a celebration. Our Latin program, which is always does such wonderful things for our students. There's a national Latin exam. District-wide, of the 44 students who took the exam, 32 scored on or above the national, it's actually international average. And when we look at our middle school students, that was 100% of our students scored at that. And those are students who didn't have the interruption in the same way as the other older students in terms of the pandemic. So that was fabulous. And overall, our students earned 7 gold medals, which is summa cum laude, 12 silver medals, which is called maxima cum laude, and 5 certificates, magna cum laude, and 5 cum laude certificates. 2 seniors qualified to apply for the prestigious scholarship with a national Latin exam. And we think that at least one of our students will receive the book prize for consecutive gold medals, which is kind of collective or over time longitudinal awards. So kudos to the students and our Latin teachers and our schools for the work they do and getting recognized in a much broader context than just our lovely 4 towns. And that is my update for the evening.
I think I was gonna request some questions or comments, but go ahead, Irv.
Just want to add something to Mike's report. Last night was the ribbon cutting for the Drake downtown. I'm on the board of directors of the Downtown Amherst Foundation, and that Amherst music group, Amherst High School music group, was extraordinary. The voices were extraordinarily good, and I was really proud to see them up there representing Amherst High School. It was really a great evening, and it was a great thing for all of them to be there. And I really want to make sure that I thanked them. I did thank one student that I saw on the street who was the lead vocalist, and she was extraordinary. She was stunned that I recognized who she was. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I'll take any questions or comments relating to the superintendent's update. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Dr. Morse, I'm glad you mentioned the Latin exam. I think it's a really great highlight of something that our public schools offer that is not common in public schools in Massachusetts. Not just language instruction, but Latin language instruction, and obviously demonstrably at a very high level at the earliest grades. And it's to have the array of language options that our students have in the middle school is really a valued service. It's one of those array of things that I think we could all do a better job of promoting. Is one of those amazing opportunities you get when you come to the middle school, and it's something I really appreciate about the funding that our member towns give us, is that you can do public school funding in a much different way than we do it, at a much lower level, and it's still fulfill your legal requirements. And our towns have decided that they value investing in this, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? All right, so we'll move on to the chair's update, which will be super brief because I don't have one. And now I will take school committee updates from committee members. I realized I just did the same thing that I did last time. So I technically did have a chair's update, just real quick. The School Equity Advisory Committee is still seeking members. You can go ahead and talk to us, but we have secured some student members, so that's pretty exciting. We'll have that announcement coming soon. So now I'll take school committee member announcements. Sarah Bess.
I feel like I should fill in for Allison. So the negotiation committee with the APEA has set a few new meeting dates. Our next meeting is the 12th, and then we have May 26th, and then June 6th and June 14th set.
Thank you. Anybody else from any subcommittees have any updates that they want to share with the rest of the world now? All right, so then we'll dive right into it. Is it Mike that's setting this one up? The third quarter budget.
Sure, I'll cue it up for Doug, and you're welcome to share your screen, Doug, if you'd like. So this is just a regular part of our meetings, a third quarter budget update, because we have some new folks at regional meetings. I think I'll try to be more explicit at the beginning of agenda items, which is probably good practice anyway. So every quarter of the year, we do an update on how our spending's going. Are we on track? Are we are we not on track? And it looks at different cost centers and expense accounts, as well as payroll, to see where we are. And so third quarter, obviously, we're leading up to the end of the school year. We want to be we now have a better sense of where we're sitting, what flexibility we have with end of year spending. So this is a regular report every 3 months that we offer to the regional school committees and the public to let them know how our spending is going. Because when we make a budget, it's really a projection. We don't know all the costs that are going to happen over the course of a school year when budgets are passed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug. These are generally pretty brief. I should say one other thing. They're generally pretty brief agenda items where our finance director, Dr. Slaughter, will go over at a high level and then open it up for questions from any committee member about any of the spending plan and where we are and what we plan to do moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it to Doug.
Thank you, Mike. The really brief story is that at the end of the third quarter, we're in good shape relative to our overall budget, the amount of funding available and the amount of expenses we've expended and expect to expend through the rest of the year are looking well on track and in good shape. I think there's, we typically use this sort of color coding along the right side to give you an indication of budget areas that might be problematic or are problematic. Right now, special education is the only one that's close. And it's really that I'm not panicked by any stretch or overly worried. I think that the funding will likely come in right about where we need it to be, and we have fortunately some resources in some of the other areas, and you can see those in looking down through that expense section that there are resources available if we need them to help support that special education area of the budget if necessary. One thing I will point out that's a little different on this one, and it's partly because it's more of trying to catch up on some things. You'll notice in the column that's labeled encumbered and projected, you'll notice some negative numbers. That's a little atypical because normally you're thinking, well, I've encumbered the money or I'm projecting to spend the money. That would be something that adds to our spending to date and or in anticipation of spending. And what the negative numbers represent are in this case either reimbursements from the other districts. So we have 3 districts that I work for and the superintendent works for, and sometimes we bill ourselves for things. And so so for example, transportation costs. So we have to bill our transportation costs to the other districts and receive that money. So some of the contracted encumbrance and projection there that you're seeing of a negative $178,000 is about the other districts owing us a little bit of money. And I've just put that in to give a true representation of where our budget sits relative to the total cost that we've incurred. And so you see that in a few spots throughout. There are some other reimbursements that we've applied in that regard. I think if you look at the substitutes line, you see a little over almost $21,000. Some of the absences we had this year and have had were purely because of precautionary measures relative to COVID. So if someone was a close contact or thought to be testing positive, that sort of thing, we would have them in a precautionary way stay out of work. That raised the total number of absences that we've had this year, and so we have to cover that cost. And fortunately, the state has had some ability to reimburse some of those costs, and so that $21,000 there represents that reimbursement to offset that expense that we have, which will allow us to basically fall in by the end of the year into our budgeted amount for our substitutes. The other thing I will say is that when we get to later this month, probably before we get to June, I will come back to you with actual adjustments that I will need your approval of, and so we'll be a little more refined with regard to our spending, our final spending for the year, where we have remaining resources available and places that are falling a little bit short. And so I will connect with the committee, and we'll have a motion to move some funds between these budget areas. That's a requirement of and a responsibility that the school committee holds to essentially balance out the budget. We don't do that on an account by account basis. There's over 1,000 lines, or around 1,000 lines in the budget, so we don't do it on an account basis. We do it in clusters of areas, and so we move funds between those to sort of balance out our spending and represent it properly for our end of year reporting. So that will be coming in the next couple of weeks. And with that, I think, again, the real message here is we're tracking very well. We're on budget. I have no expectation of anything that's going to come up in this last quarter that's going to cause considerable pain and suffering to sort of accommodate in our budget. We will closely monitor our special education spending here in the last quarter, and we have the resources in other areas to help support that area of our budget, and bring it in totality under the total amount budgeted. So I'll take any questions anyone has relative to this third quarter report.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Doug, I have a couple of questions. What are some of the drivers of the special education spending?
There's a few different things. Some of it is out-of-district placements are very expensive. We've had, at times you'll have short-term out-of-district placements. Sometimes they do evaluations of that sort. Those are not always fully anticipated, so sometimes those will come up. There's been some additional cost for transportation this year for some of those out-of-district placements and other program placements that we've had. So we've had those, the transportation cost is, relative to the totality of things is for an individual child, it's not that great, and we try to, if we have 3 kids going to a program, we'll put all 3 of them on the same van, that sort of thing. So that makes the cost a third of it would be for one person to go, but those are non-trivial at times. And so there's some transportation costs. We have, some need in that area. We've been working throughout the year to get more drivers on board in district, and that's lowered that demand over the last few weeks and months. And I think the other thing that happens in that area of the budget is if we are unable or have particular needs relative to evaluating students. So if we, for example, if we need a bilingual psychologist to do an evaluation of a student, and we don't have one of those on staff, and so we would have to contract that out. So some of our contracted services are a little higher. And also, earlier in the year when we hadn't gotten fully hired through or fully staffed to meet all the projected amounts of staffing that we'd need, again, we would be contracting external agencies to provide some support for meeting the needs of the students. And so it comes under the expense account. We save a little bit in our salary accounts in that short term, and so those often offset, but nonetheless, those are a couple of the areas in a couple of ways in which that budget starts to get a little larger than anticipated.
Thank you. Tessa? You're on mute still?
Sorry. Right. So I was just wondering, I know how the high school has gotten new monitors in the hallway. I was just wondering which category that expense cost would come out of in this chart.
Sure. So if you're meaning monitors like TV set type monitors that are displaying, messages, that sort of, or people?
The people.
People. So that's going to be in the salary category, the very top line there. Again, having those staff come on during the year, some positions were open. So some of the people that have come on in recent months are filling positions that had been open earlier in the year, and so they were budgeted for. Some of those additional staff are an expense above what was expected in regard to what we budgeted. So yeah, those are in that top line, blended in with your teacher salaries and some of the other staff. So that's where those exist.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, so last meeting we talked about the theater department budget and the deficit that they've run for a couple of years now through COVID, with the complete loss of revenue from the 2020 cancellation of the musical, and then the reduced revenue in the last couple of years from ticket sales. And so we talked about at this meeting during Q3 budget update, if there was flexibility, we could think about, does it now seem like towards the end of the year there's possibility to help reset that account, which is it's a smallish but not zero-ish kind of number. So what is the update on that? Are we looking like there's going to be some flexibility to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the tricky things is that most of that funding travels through the student activities accounts, so it's set separate from this budget and financially distinct from that. However, there are some costs that are held within this budget and or can be transferred into this budget, or the expenses can be transferred into this budget. And certainly, when I come to you later in the month, we should be able to accommodate that a little bit. So it'll be kind of tucked into some other lines here, but we should be able to do a little bit of support in that regard and kind of bolster the circumstances that they're in.
Peter again.
Yeah, so just a brief follow-up. That would be great. I think whatever we can do to help them creatively would be really good. It's been, they've been very self-sufficient for many years. And so like I appreciate that it's the largest cohort activity of students outside of graduation. And the fact that they don't normally take from our main operational budget is obviously a benefit to our planning. I heard from quite a few parents and community members when I saw hair, which was amazing, by the way, as everybody has said, about the fundraising that they've tried to do to keep that afloat. And that is great that people have contributed their funds, but it's really just, trying to get them back to, if that's fundraising that would have gone to purchase things that are on their long list of things that need to be upgraded and replaced anyway. So yeah, I think whatever opportunities we can to help that out, given this one-time COVID impact, would be great.
If I may just add one other thing, there is, we have in some of our use of ESSER funds have targeted some of those funds to help support the theater program just generally, and it's more around capital items in and around that space. So it benefits the classes that involve theater arts and stage management, all that sort of stuff that we have, or stagecraft, I believe is the term that's used. So we have some of that support, which then ultimately sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. It helps the theater, sort of after school and student activity as well. So there'll be a little support that way. Those are sometimes areas in which they'd use a little bit of their own resources to help fund some of those kind of things in small ways, small replacement here or there, that sort of thing. So that burden will be off of them a little bit as we use those funds to help support that program and do some infrastructural work in that theater space.
Jennifer, go ahead.
I just have two questions about reading this report. The first is, Doug, can you broadly describe what's in other programs, which is like the biggest expense, the biggest line in the expense accounts?
Other program is basically three things: charter tuition, school choice out tuition, and vocational tuition. Those are the three primary things. There's a couple other small items within that, but that's the lion's share of what you're seeing right there. And so as those expenses, as kids choose those options and we get charged for them, then we pay from that series of accounts.
Great. Thank you. And the last question is, the color coding is great because it focuses your eye where you need it to go. Do you have hard definitions of green, yellow, and red?
I do not.
Okay. Just if you're concerned or not.
No, and I think so the reason why not in some respects is because we have certain areas of the budget, and I explained this is more prominent in the earlier the first and second quarter reports. So when we look at something like information systems, they do renew all software licenses in the first month of the new fiscal year, and so when we look at first quarter, they're at 55% or 60%, which would normally prompt you to put a bright sort of flag on that. So that's part of why, because there's areas of the budget that sort of expend a bunch of money early and some that expend a bunch of money late. And so it's sort of looking at each of those in turn and trying to strike some balance there. But nonetheless, I'm open to suggestion on that. And certainly if there are questions regarding any of the particulars within that, I'm happy to answer any of those or get you answers to that, whether it be in the meeting or offline.
Do you have any more questions or comments on the third quarter budget update? Right. Well, thank you, Doug. We'll move on to the AFSCME contract ratification. Do we need to actually display the contract up there, or can we just kind of bullet point this?
So the contract that was ratified by the members was posted on Board Docs, so it was available to members of the public as well as members of the committee. I think the financial elements, that it's retro because this year it goes back to this year and then 2 more years, and it's on page. Sorry, people often just go straight to the financials, so I don't mean to minimize the other pieces, but on page 4. Where for the current year it would be 2% increase from base wages, and I'm just doing the broad summary, and then next year 2.5%, and the following year 2.5% increase, And I want to appreciate Doreen Cunningham and others who contributed to this, as well as members of AFSCME who worked with us to come up with a compromise that was, working collaboratively with district staff and committee members to move forward with the multi-year contract, which we haven't had in a little while. So the historical piece of AFSCME is that what gets agreed to is an adjustment to an other document. It doesn't actually, it's kind of hard to follow because it's, we hopefully will get a consolidated new document, but what was posted is the sort of changes to the document, which is the way business is done with AFSCME, or has been done. So we're trying to get a more consolidated document, but I think the key changes were noted in the document, and it was ratified 2 weeks ago, somewhere in that neighborhood, by members of AFSCME. It was discussed in executive session, as was noted in the posting at the last regional school committee meeting. So we bring the document that was ratified by AFSCME tonight in hopes that the school committee will ratify it, and we can let AFSCME members know that we're moving forward with the new contract and get to issuing salary notices with the updated information, especially as it retros to this year, so that the business office can do what the business office needs to do to make sure the members receive their increases, which were negotiated. And I think that's the summary. I'm happy to answer, as is Doug, any questions about it, but it was posted so that any members of the public could see what was agreed to. I should note that AFSCME for the general public is primarily what's thought of as our custodial and maintenance employees in our district, and they do incredible work, and particularly during the pandemic, have been in our buildings more than anybody, and solving problems that were not foreseeable on the front end. And so really just want to offer my appreciation for the continued dedication and hard work of members of that bargaining unit.
Craig, did you intentionally put your hand down, or did you still have a?
Well, Mike just answered the question. I was going to say I didn't understand the acronym. So they are, they negotiate directly outside of the bargaining for the clerical and kitchen and teachers and paras. Okay.
Yep, they're part of a different national organization, so they're not part of that same bargaining structure.
Before we open up for discussion, does anybody want to make a motion? Oh, there we go. Jennifer.
I move that we approve the AFSCME contract.
And I will second that. All right. We'll take I will open it up for discussion. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm in favor of it. I just wanted to say that Mike, you mentioned that the documentation was odd, and I think maybe one time that Doreen was here, she also mentioned that in the past, management and the union have taken turns at who updates the document, but they hadn't decided this year. I think I find it odd and maybe not a best practice to not have a master document that's updated with the changes with every round of contract bargaining, because then if you want to go back and look at your contract as a member, you don't know where, like, is it this section, and is this section changed from the original? But I would imagine that's, if AFSCME members are okay with it, then they're the ones who I would think would be most impacted by that. But I would think it would be a best practice to have one document that's updated with all the changes. So that's just my input there.
Absolutely 100% endorse that point of view. Yeah, I like clean things, and this doesn't feel as clean as I'd like it, but that's not a knock on the content. It's more about, the document, but I agree. Thank you for raising it.
I'll go ahead and triple down on that. It's better for everyone involved to have like a clear, concise document that actually can be read from. And does anybody else have any questions or comments about the contract? All right. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and take one of those roll call votes. We'll start with Craig.
Craig abstains.
Margaret.
Margaret, I.
Sarah Bess.
Sarah Beth, aye.
Peter,
Peter, I.
Jennifer,
Jennifer, I.
and Ben, I. Motion passes with 5 ayes and 1 abstention. And also, I would like to thank all of the members who asked me for all the hard work you folks do. Full disclosure, I thank them directly every day too. It's good to get acknowledged publicly too. So, we will move on to public comment process and procedures. Is that a Peter Demling deal?
So I wasn't at the last meeting. I think Allison brought this to the committee's attention. And if I recall, there was some ideas suggested at that meeting, and then the decision was to bring it up again at this meeting to give members more time to think about ideas and to what extent we wanted to direct things to the policy subcommittee and to what extent we might want to just make implementation suggestions. I think if that's a fair summary. I just watched the meeting yesterday, so.
Oh. Yeah, that's solid. So did have folks haven't had any time to go ahead and think over new ways to receive public comment or anything? Any ideas of? Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just add my 2 cents. So I think it's a really good topic to broach. I think the complication is that it's, you know, when you talk about public comment and public engagement, and particularly how public comment works at a school committee meeting, you're talking about multiple goals. So there's like the goal of the school committee doing its business in an efficient and productive way in public. That's like one purpose of the meeting. Then there's the goal of allowing the public to comment publicly prior to our deliberations and discussions. So that's another goal of wanting to make that accessible and have that opportunity to be as available as possible. And then there's the public wanting to engage with the school committee, potentially ask questions, get clarifications on topics. And I think in terms of, you know, what we might want to change or evolve or keep going forward, I think particularly as we think about, you know, what is this going to look like when we get back to in-person meetings. I think sometimes those public comment at the beginning of a school committee meeting doesn't serve all 3 of those goals. Or rather, I'm sorry, not the public comment at the beginning, I mean, but this idea of should we respond to public comment. So like we already have the policy currently, like BEDH, right? The covers public comment that we updated a couple of years ago at the start of COVID meetings. And it's, you know, I understand we're talking about maybe changing the policy, so it's not like we're locked into this, but, you know, the idea is that the public comment is a discussion, not a debate, and not a dialogue between residents and the committee. And that our meetings are meetings of public session. And we have a separate policy for public forums and for hearings. And so if we think that there's a topic, either specific or general, that we want to have a more kind of dialogue-y experience with the public, we have that opportunity. And then there's also a section that I found helpful, and this might actually be beneficial to maybe just reemphasize, that says, you know, if questions or inquiries can be answered briefly based on available information to the committee chair or superintendent may respond at that time. So we already have baked into the public comment policy the ability for the chair or the superintendent to offer clarifying information or answers if the public comment comes up. So, you know, and I think if we changed it to allowing members to just kind of open-endedly respond, it could lead to some potential risks. I think the open meeting law management is not trivial for the chair to manage, to have to constantly monitor if members are starting to opine on topics outside of a posted agenda topic. I also think, you know, in terms of like wanting to change and evolve our practices to be more welcoming and encouraging and listening of public input, for us to be talking more doesn't sound like it particularly goes down that direction. And, you know, and I wouldn't want to get in a situation where we have some topic that's really engaging the public, and so some people want are in favor of it. Some people are against it. They're offering their views. And then, members might be encouraged to then speak in favor or against that comment when that comment comes up. And, I know that like we might not want to do it, but we have to be thinking about, the school committees of the future, because we're talking about changing a policy. And I just think that could go down an unproductive road. That being said, I think there were a lot of ideas I heard last time that I think are very much worth exploring. So Jennifer brought up, what if we had text message input to public comment, or what if we offered translation of public comment? If it could be submitted in Spanish and then translated. Both of those things I think would fall under. We would need to work out what's the impact, the implementation. Because one thing I always want to be mindful of on school committee is that it's easy for us to say, do this thing, but when it ultimately this falls as a task, a recurring task to someone in central office, and we don't have a massively staffed central office. We've gotten smaller over the years proportionally, and so I would want to think through the logistical details and have central office come back to us and say, okay, here's what the considerations are for practically implementing translation, for practically implementing, text in terms of, public record and getting it published in a timely way and those kinds of things. But I think that's something we should pursue. And, Jennifer also mentioned, publishing the way to make public comment on the website. I think that's absolutely, we should be doing that. But I think it speaks more broadly to communicating to the public, how do they engage with us, right? So we have the school committee email, which isn't public comment, but is a great way to provide input to and ask questions or ask for engagement. And that can often lead to individual member or multiple individual members engaging with a member of the public. And so that's part of the broader umbrella of how does the public engage with the school committee. And not all of the public may be aware that there are things other than public comment where you can ask questions, provide feedback, offer your perspective, influence the work of the committee. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there. I think there's a lot of good suggestions, and I think we should pursue them. But I am not entirely in favor of the idea of like responding to public comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd have to say I agree with that. Yeah, that part. Actually, I agree with everything there. But like, I'm not necessarily in favor of the idea of responding directly back to public comment, because I think that there are a lot of folks that it takes a lot of effort to get up here, like a lot of courage, to gather their courage to come up here and actually speak to us. And I'm mostly thinking about when we get back to in person. I wouldn't want to do anything to give somebody the feeling that they should be uncomfortable doing that, or more uncomfortable. Like, public speaking isn't easy for everybody. But did anybody else have anything to add here? Jennifer.
I guess I'm proposing an idea to have I don't know if it's like an ad hoc committee or a subcommittee to work on community interaction. I don't really mean community engagement, although those are sort of similar, but like how, as Peter was saying, how do we interact with the community? I find board docs to be super confusing, even for me, and also very confusing for the members of the public. I find the ARPS website to be confusing. Like, it's like we've moved to board docs, so all of the information is on board docs now, but people aren't gonna, like, it's just like when you search for information about the Amherst or the regional school committee, it's hard to find what you're looking for. And I think that there are some simple changes that we can make that would make that easier. And I have a bunch of ideas. But yeah, but I think it's something that, I don't know, like, is this what we would do, is like have a small group of people work on it and then make proposals to either the central office or to the school committee about how to improve interacting with the community and the public.
I was gonna say, I personally would be in favor of having a working group. Go ahead, Mike.
I think perhaps there's two different things happening here. So one was a discussion about the policy around public comment. And then I think I hear is a question about an ad hoc group thinking about public, and I didn't write it down, I apologize, Jennifer, public interaction. And I don't know how those dovetail. And I'm not asking that. It's not a question I expect to be answered. So I think, but there's probably some connection or crossover between them. So, you know, I guess my process perspective, which to use or lose, because it may not be right, is to bring that to the policy subcommittee, and maybe that's an offshoot of the policy subcommittee, because I think it does get beyond policy from what I'm hearing. But I don't want there to be parallel paths that don't speak to one another, because I think it's what you're suggesting is really important. But I wanted to speak in concert with anything that would change from a policy perspective. So that's just my 2 cents, but obviously to use or lose.
Peter.
So I think the short, easy answer is that there are enough potentially beneficial, practical suggestions about how we do public comment at school committee meetings, and certainly some items that we're going to have to address when we go back in person in terms of what we keep or don't keep or maintain or don't maintain. But it totally makes sense to refer to the policy subcommittee to do some kind of independent, or not independent, impartial, just sort of collecting of information. Here's the options, here's the considerations for the committee to consider for the policy update. As the broader issue of community engagement, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing to scope, I think. So I think the first helpful thing is to think about it in terms of school committee engagement with the public, because the district engagement with the public is a whole nother ball of wax, right? That incorporates a whole nother things. But if we're talking about, how we provide information and resources about our meetings and our work and our decisions and our projects and whatnot, and our purview in the budget and all that, and how we actually provide that on board docs and on ARPS, and how the public in turn provides feedback. That certainly is more broad than just public comment, right? I mean, even just email is a way to do that. So I don't know what the most efficient way to do that would be. I do understand, there are definitely some peculiarities of board docs that frustrate me. The fact that you can't just copy the URL to share it as a link is this bad UI design. That being said, we have come a long way in terms of information being available and accessible, even if it's not super intuitive. So I think we're moving in the right path. I do know from having explored some of this stuff a little bit a couple of years ago, is that we do kind of run into a resource issue, right? Where if you really want to talk about having a great design and a great updated, well-structured resource of information that's responsive and that is practical and that gets tested and that people respond, and you incorporate, it's time and effort on staff, right? And so it becomes kind of like a project. That being said, I think it's still worthy to pursue, and COVID and board docs are opportunities to do that. Given that it's May, I don't know exactly what the most practical, efficient use of time would be.
Margaret?
I just wanted to add that I think that in some form, this came up at our retreat this past year. And I'm not sure how much progress we've actually made. So perhaps that would be a time to really pick that up again. And if there are going to be any goals for the school committee, that perhaps somehow it could be incorporated into that as well.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, comments, or, well, I guess questions or comments? All right. So I'm going to look to Peter to help me out with this next one. Can somebody, Mike, do you have the ability to share the fair share amendment resolution?
Ben, do you want me to cue this up while he's pulling that up?
Yes, please.
All right. So fair share amendment, for those of you who don't know, is a ballot question that will be on the ballot. Public vote, everyone in the state. Massachusetts constitutional amendment to add a 4% per dollar tax to every dollar of personal income above $1 million. That is then specifically dedicated for basically education and infrastructure. And so this is a resolution, proposed draft resolution of our committee supporting and endorsing that amendment. Really the broad-based theme here that is kind of outlined in the first couple of points is that is what are we trying to accomplish and what's the barrier, right? And so it's just a description of that everybody in the state deserves equal access to a really well-rounded, well-staffed public education with every opportunity, and that not only our school district but districts across the state for years have not been able to provide that in the way that we have ideally wanted to, because primarily because of a shortfall in funding from the state. And the next several points kind of hone that in and talk about how that's impacted districts like ours, like in particular. So it talks about the impact of on towns. Like we have some small member towns that have very limited options for raising local revenue that we hear about at Fort Towns meetings. We are a flat to declining enrollment district overall, generally speaking, like a large percentage of districts are in Massachusetts. And as a result, because of the state formula, we rely on minimum per pupil aid, which has never come close to what the Mass Municipal Association, which is the association of all cities and towns in Massachusetts, has advocated for years. It should be in order to make sure that we're not left behind. And we get that further exacerbated because as a result of not getting large Chapter 70 increases, we rely on these subject to appropriation line items, right? The charter reimbursement, homeless student transportation, circuit breaker for large special education expenses. And because they're subject to appropriation, unfortunately, the state legislature often looks at them as optional, right? And that they don't have to fund them. And so they're not. And so that impacts us. And then for regional schools, we rely on transportation reimbursement. And again, this was a promise that the state made to all regional schools when they regionalized, saying that, in order to give up that autonomy and form this new structure, we're going to reimburse you. And to be blunt, that's been a broken promise. And that's been subject to appropriation. And so then what's the opportunity? So we're coming out of the pandemic here, and we had this great leap forward with the Student Opportunity Act a couple of years ago, right? Which did a lot for a lot of schools, particularly for schools of much lower income that have been chronically underfunded themselves. So this is but that's a phased-in implementation in terms of funding it, and it's certainly not guaranteed. So that's one piece of this. And so how do we do this? And it's pretty simple. This additional tax that on much larger incomes to fund these core services. And this last quote I took from the MTA president, Marian Najimy, because one, I think it's just a beautiful quote about the promise of public education, but really what to kind of bring this full circle, what this comes back to is this November is going to be an opportunity for school committees, cities and towns, teachers unions to come together to support and unite over a common cause. And it's quite likely, given the magnitude of dollars we're talking about, this is a couple billion extra in revenue, that there's going to be a big political fight about it. And it may very well be like what happened 6 years ago with the charter school expansion question 2 vote, where the charter school expansion side way overspent the no on 2 side. But the no on 2 side had school committees united, the MTA united, and lots of cities and towns united, and soundly won that as a victory. And I think it's going to be similar in this respect, where we have the MTA has been out in front. A lot of progressive organizations across the state have been out in front on this. And I think the more that school committees, particularly across the state, can form a coalition in support of this, we'll be able to assist in this. And it's a particularly good wheelhouse for school committee advocacy, because we can't do a lot to directly affect state decisions a lot, but but we do carry a fair bit of influence with the public, with our immediate public, because they elected us, right? So when there's an opportunity, a rare opportunity for the public to have a referendum like this that could significantly impact education, you know, town councils, town meetings, school committees, all these organizations coming together in support of this is what can really make this happen. So yeah, so that is the long-winded summary of this amendment, of this resolution.
Thank you for that, Peter. And did anyone have anything to add to that? Or, yep, Jennifer, go ahead.
I think this is great, and I plan to vote in favor of it. Can I make a few suggestions on the wording of the document?
Certainly.
This is a small thing, but I think it's meaningful. I just in the first whereas, I just would suggest changing all children to all students deserve equal access, because you know, some of this fair share amendment will go to universities, and those students are not children, they're students. So I don't know, just a thought to make it sort of a little bit more all encompassing. I wanted to ask about the third whereas. In the last line, conflicts between school officials, teachers unions, and municipal leaders. I mean, that just feels, I don't know. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, I don't know if we want to talk about conflicts. I don't know, just maybe a little bit uncomfortable to talk about conflicts between the district and the unions. Although I feel like, you know, lack of funding does cause that conflict, but I don't know if necessarily this is the place to point that out. And then just my last question or suggestion is, in the whereas with the circuit breaker, I had to look up circuit breaker, and I probably still have to look it up. Like, circuit breaker is a funding mechanism, but it's used for things other than this context. So if we could just define what that means, and just so that other people who read this will understand what circuit breaker means, that would be great.
Ben, it looks like you're muted.
That's good, because I was trying to figure out how this queue thing worked. So as long as everyone didn't hear me questioning myself. Well, I'll take Craig and then Peter again.
So this same a variation of this was presented at Leverett Town Meeting, adapted for town vote, not for school committee vote, and it passed. And the Leverett School Committee passed the same wording, pretty much the same wording last night. One thing that has come up in conversation that was brought up at Leverett Town Meeting, and we discussed it also, is I think in the very last whereas, it points out that, you know, the 4%, the additional 4% tax is on income above $1 million. In my understanding about this also, as presented by Kip Vaughn presented this to the town of Leverett and to the school committee, is that this is meant to become part of the Massachusetts Constitution. Okay, so not too easily changed. And one of our select people mentioned that, hey, you know, let's just think about $1 million in 2022 isn't the same thing as $1 million in 2050. So, you know, just something to bear in mind. Obviously, we're not crafting constitutional language here, but we are voting on whether to support this or not. I'm in full support of this, and if it passes with this language, it's fine with me. It's just something that I thought was brought up that I found an interesting perspective. That was all.
Thank you. Peter?
So I'm not 100% sure, but I thought I remembered reading that in the actual text of the amendment, it talks about periodically adjusting that value for inflation. I can look it up after I'm done making this comment, but I
heard
think
the same thing.
Yeah, I think if you click through one of those links, it'll describe it. But yeah, so that's great that Leverett passed it. I think we should get as many. And this is another great thing of why this is a good opportunity for us to focus on, which is, you know, often we're outnumbered by the East, right? So it's like Western Mass gets left behind. But in this case, one vote, you know, from a citizen in Leverett counts as much as a vote from a person in Boston, right? So if we can activate people locally and they can activate their social networks across the state, you know, this is an opportunity for us. I think that's a great suggestion, changing children to students. This does focus on, you know, our district's impact, but you're absolutely right. This is about K-12 and higher ed as well. Circuit breaker definition, that's a great suggestion to add the description in there, because you know, one thing, a major part of this is to try and educate the public about it as well, right? So that they have the information themselves and are able to explain it to other people. So I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, the line about conflicts is an interesting point, I guess. Like, I mean, I'm fine if people would rather take it out. The reason why I put it in there is that you know, I'm whenever there's a conflict from a school committee point of view with a town or with the teachers union, and it ultimately comes back to funding, I get really frustrated because ultimately we share the same values, right? We all share the same values, that we want a fully funded education, yet we don't have that. And this is talking about why that is, you know, and it's that the state is underfunding it. And it, you know, I mean, the state has made a legislative decision, for example, to go from a 6% state sales tax to state income tax to 5%. It's a big reason why they don't have as much revenue as they used to. So I feel like, you know, that gap in the state's responsibility creates the problems locally, right? And that this then is an opportunity for groups that might normally have to be in conflict about resources to be united about it. But I'm fine if we take that off if it sounds too negative. You know, whatever people want to do.
Margaret?
I would be in support of leaving the term in there, of leaving the word in there, because I really think it reflects what the reality of what we have to deal with.
Thank you. And so just a quick procedural question, I think I know the answer to, but better to answer it or ask it publicly. So this serves as our first read, right? Well, it's not policy though, right? So we could potentially vote on this. Yep. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, it's not a policy, so we can vote on it tonight. There's not, I mean, it's November, right? So there's not an immediate rush. So I don't see anything lost if we want to wait a month. But if people are comfortable voting tonight, I think that's also fine.
So I'll put it out there that if folks are comfortable feeling or on voting this tonight, I will entertain a motion. Jennifer.
So I guess am I not supposed to speak and then make a motion? But I'll just say I will withdraw my comment about the conflicts between school officials. And can I make a motion that we approve this resolution as amended with the changing the children to students and defining the circuit breaker?
Absolutely, and I will second that. Look around here. We'll take roll call votes, or we can open it up for further discussion. Seeing no visible interest in further discussion, I will take a roll call vote. Start with Peter.
Peter, aye.
Margaret.
Margaret, aye.
Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bess, aye.
Craig.
Craig, aye.
And Ben, aye. The motion passes unanimously.
Jennifer, I.
Oh, Lord. Jennifer, aye. Now the motion passes unanimously. Sorry about that. Right. So now we'll move on to the conflict of interest disclosure letter here. Mike, did you want to cue that up? All right.
This was also posted on board docs. So in essence, this is a letter from legal counsel, which is Mark Terry, just indicating that because Dr. Slaughter is involved in negotiations and has a spouse employed in Unit C as a paraeducator, that this disclosure needs to occur and actually be voted by the regional school committee. There's another committee that eventually will need to meet to talk about it, but since that committee is not called to order, I will not reference it this evening. And a waiver has been completed there's no concerns from our legal counsel's perspective other than, as this is come up as negotiations, that the regional school committee would vote to accept the waiver and allow for Dr. Slaughter to continue to be working in the negotiations with the APEA. So I don't know if there's any more, that needs to be added to our best from the negotiating team, but from my perspective, I have no concerns about the waiver. And I think, Amherst and the 4 towns are small communities. There's often lots of hats that people wear. And in this case, I don't have any concerns that the right hat is on while negotiations are occurring. But that's for you all to decide. But that's the letter that Attorney Terry wrote and needs to be considered and potentially voted one way or the other in a public meeting.
I'll take the leap here. I'll read this motion. Did everyone have a chance to read through this previously? So I'm not, all right, cool. Not speaking. All right, so I move to waive the Director of Finance, Doug Slaughter's conflict of interest under Section 19 of the Conflict of Interest Law, as his interest is not too substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the committee may expect of him, and to authorize the chair to sign the non-elected municipal employee of financial interest and determination by appointing authority as required by general law, chapter 268A, section 19 form, and to take other steps as may be necessary to accomplish the committee's waiver of this conflict. Yes.
I'll second.
Who seconded first? We'll go with Craig. He's new. All right, so moved by me, seconded by Craig. I will open up the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I'm starting off with not being in favor of the motion. On principle, nothing specific to Doug or his situation. But it seems to me that this is a mass general law for a reason, and that I mean the default is that a person in this situation shouldn't serve. And yeah, I'm starting off feeling uncomfortable with it, and I'd love to hear what other people think. I mean, we do have 2 school committee members who are in a similar situation who recuse themselves from any discussion, even executive session on this topic. So it feels a little odd that we would allow a staff member in the same position to be involved. So I'm not comfortable with it right off the bat.
Peter.
So Doug is a municipal employee, not a school committee member. So there's different laws. My understanding of the law as outlined in the memo is that it does not say that if someone has this level of conflict of interest that they should not participate. We have the declaration below, which submits for consideration the appropriate exception as outlined in the Mass General Law. And then the statement is essentially that his interest is not so. I'm just reading the motion. His interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the committee may expect of him. And in my evaluation, my opinion, if that's what Dr. Slaughter attests to, then I accept that statement from him on face value, and the fact that he submits this document is validation enough of that for me, and so I'm comfortable voting for it.
Any other thoughts? Jennifer, thank you for breaking the awkward silence.
Sure. I guess I have a question about what that statement means. His interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of services. His interest is not so substantial. I guess I don't quite understand what is intended by that. It feels like a legal term, and I don't quite understand what that means. Does that mean I don't, if someone wants to enlighten me as to what that means, that would be great.
This would probably be an awesome time to have the district's council here. Peter, go ahead.
So I don't think this requires us to be lawyers in order to define that term. It's a motion that we are stating that we support what the motion says. And so if the motion says his interest is not so substantial, then we refer down below to what the disclosure says. And I won't read the entire disclosure, but it talks about what the particular matter is, what is the required participation is, what the financial interest in the matter is. And so if we, as an individual committee member, feel like the interest as articulated by Dr. Slaughter is substantial as to be deemed likely to affect his integrity, then we would vote against it. But I'll just come back to what I said at the top, is that if Dr. Slaughter is attesting here publicly that he feels that it's not affecting his ability to be objective in this matter and represent the interest of the district, then I take that as face value. And this is a provided exception to the Mass General Law that he's applying.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely respect all the different viewpoints that were shared. You know, I think the distinction between a school committee member and a staff member is that a school committee member is a decision maker on what happens in negotiations, where a staff member doesn't have a vote. Now, that's not to suggest that staff members don't play an integral role. And I think, I don't want to parrot what Peter said, but it's really around whether we believe, or you believe, excuse me, whether Dr. Slaughter's statement around that he can hold the integrity of keeping the interests of the district at the core of his role, as opposed to his connection through a family member to the other side of what would happen in negotiations. And that's a decision you all have to make. I can't make that for you. I can only express my viewpoint that in my discussions with Dr. Slaughter, I've seen no wavering of looking out for the district's best financial interests. But again, that's an assessment that each individual school committee member will have to make. And certainly Dr. Slaughter has other things he could do with his time. So it's not around that part of it. It's simply around whether he can be effective in completing the role with integrity. And again, that's a judgment call for school committee members to make.
So before I jump to Doug real quick, the thing that stood out to me, and then I just had to go back and reread within the waiver. So we're talking about negotiations that will then be presented to us to make the call on, right? So we would be holding him in check. Essentially, I don't mean to make it sound like you're subservient to us or anything, but I feel like we are kind of the right, we're the firewall essentially. It's how I saw this. But go ahead, Doug.
The only thing I was going to add is that it will be, given the disclosure of what interest is in place for me, given that my wife is in Unit C, it's fairly clear that if I were to make suggestions that would be, that would negatively impact the district relative to positively impacting my financial circumstances, it would be pretty clearly noticeable to the school committee. So as they went both to the negotiating members that are on the negotiations, but also the full committee before they ratify. So you do have that extra layer of opportunity to identify any potential overstepping in my regard. But certainly, what I'm attesting to is that as we consider and evaluate, various options and propose suggestions for the negotiation, I'm focused first and foremost on best interest of the district and its financial health, and coordinating and helping the negotiating team get to an agreement with the APEA. So I am setting aside personal interest in that regard, but it's clear, and that is the purpose of this, is to recognize and clearly state publicly that it is a conflict and could appear to be a significant one. And I'm attesting to the fact that it will not be a significant one.
Anybody have anything to add before we take a roll call vote? Looking like a no, so I will start. We'll go Peter,
Peter, I.
Margaret,
Margaret, I.
Sarah Bess,
Sarah Bess, aye.
Craig,
Craig, aye.
Jennifer,
Jennifer, no.
and me, I. Motion passes with 5 ayes and 1 nay. So we will move on to future agenda planning. Mike, do you have a document to
Can
share?
read through it. The next meeting is on the 24th. We'll have ESSER spending up. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Margaret?
I think she's saying I can wait.
Wait.
I can wait till Mike's done.
I'm good at lip reading. All right, yeah, go ahead.
ESSER spending update, track fundraising, a math update, a couple years out from the changes in the math curriculum. One thing that may come up is there's a proposal to change the standards for passing the MCAS. I've gotten some feedback on that, not locally, at the state level. We're in the public comment period of that. A couple people reached out to me and wondered if we were going to speak or have a discussion about whether the regional school committee endorses that or doesn't. So that might be a topic that's we have for the next meeting. So that's what I have at the current time, but certainly could have other topics be added. Certainly other topics could be added, sorry.
Peter.
Policy subcommittee meets tomorrow, so I am anticipating we'll have a number of items there for your consideration. Anywhere from, I don't know, 2 to 5 or more. Some of them might be pretty quick, but we may have a major and a couple of minor updates.
That's fair. Margaret?
So the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee met last night, and we would like to bring to that meeting the proposed timeline for the evaluation process and a draft of the instrument, the evaluation instrument.
Anyone else have anything to add? And if anything comes up between now and then, you can always send suggestions via email. I'm open to them. So moving on to the warrant report. I don't see Irv, so I feel like. Oh, Margaret, go ahead.
I don't have a warrant report, but when I volunteered to be the backup for Irv, I had forgotten that I did this once before. And again, because it ties in with a family member being in the APA, supposedly I can't sign the warrants because sometimes they're payroll. I guess I do wonder, because I have done a disclosure statement when I joined the committee, whether signing those warrants is really a conflict of interest, because I'm not changing anything. So I don't know how that gets decided, but.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding is it's best practice, whether it's technically conflict of interest or not, there's the appearance of conflict of interest in signing warrants with a family member who would be directly affected by them. That's my understanding. But certainly you can check with legal counsel. I'm not a lawyer, but it may be worth checking on that aspect of it.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Before we did something like that, we should find out if there's somebody else who could be the backup for the warrants signing.
I think at this point, just by attrition. Oh, wait a minute. We have a new person that we might be able to throw this at. Greg, you have.
If it means physically going to Amherst, I live about 20 minutes away, so I'd really rather not. I signed the warrants in Leverett, which I'm the closest, because I'm the closest physically to where they need to be, the town hall. If there's anyone who's closer. If it's digitally, then yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm the best candidate since I've never seen one in Amherst before, but I'm familiar with the process in Leverett at least.
Well, by virtue of default, you are the best candidate for this at this point.
Oh, because everyone else has avoided it.
In one way, shape, or
What's
form.
the problem with it? Why?
Well, it's really not that bad. I just want to point out that this is like, it's not like labor intensive. Like, this is the backup to the main signer.
Right.
So go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure Craig knew that he's backing up Irv, that Irv's the one who signed, and Craig would only sign if Irv was unable to.
Right.
And yes, it's all digital, my understanding.
Oh, it's digital? Okay, I'll be a backup. I don't know why everyone else is avoiding it if it's so simple, but so maybe I'm naively stepping into something I really don't want to do, but it doesn't seem like that.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So seeing as we don't have any warrants, that was our entire warrant discussion. I didn't see any gifts in the packet unless I missed something in board docs. I did not miss anything in board docs. Well, go ahead.
You did miss something in board docs.
I did. What did I miss
Yeah.
here?
There is one gift. I can display it on the screen.
Oh, got it. Yep, please.
Board docs doesn't have any attachments under that item. Oh, the gift. That's all that.
Does anybody want to? Okay, Jennifer. I think. Wait, who's first? Yeah, Jennifer.
I move that we accept the gift from Barbara and James Pistrang, number 2744, to support the 2022 ARMS Ultimate Scholarship in the amount of $1,000.
Second.
There. I will go. A roll call vote here. Sorry. So, Sarah Bess,
Sarah Bess, aye.
Jennifer,
Jennifer, I.
Craig,
Craig, aye.
Margaret,
Margaret, I.
Peter,
Peter, I.
and Ben, I. So now I will skip ahead and entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Jennifer, seconded by Margaret. Peter, I'll take a roll call vote. Peter,
Peter, I.
Margaret,
Margaret, I.
Jennifer,
Jennifer, I.
Sarah Bess,
Sarah Bess, aye.
Craig, aye.
well, Craig, I.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, Ben, I. We'll go with that. I'll take that. All right, folks.